Thanks, Nzinga. Well, market news out in Asia as well as where we kick things off. The start of the week seeing losses as trade fears return. Asian markets then starting off today on a negative note. Trade tensions returning to the fore. Donald Trump eyeing fresh tariffs now on what is a swathe of Chinese goods. And NAFTA talks with Canada also hitting the wall. The optimism that permeated trading floors at the start of last week has now been replaced by what is now a familiar sense of dread after the US president hit out at Ottawa over the weekend as the two sides struggle to hammer out a new deal. Trade fears returning, so Asia weak this morning. Tokyo's Nikkei down 0.7%, 22,707. The Hang Seng dropping a similar margin to close at 27678. Shanghai's Composite slightly down, 2,720. Out of the United States now, the S&P 500 ending flat on Friday, while the Dow edged lower and the Nasdaq closing high in light of light trading on Friday as trade talks between Canada and the United States concluded without a resolution. And that was ahead of the Labor Day weekend. The United States market won't be opening later today due to the holiday. But last week, the Dow Jones Industrial was marginally lower at 25,964 points. The S&P 500 gaining an inch, 2,901. Nasdaq Composite around 0.25% to the good, closing at 8,109 points. A positive market reaction today, 0.5% to the good for the JSE after those 2 days of losses last week. It seems to have come back just a touch. I don't know whether that's overselling or not, but we'll check in on the market just a little bit later on with Viv Govender. And the Rand as well, weakening quite substantially, and we'll unpack exactly what's moving that. But for now, let's get a clearer picture of how the European and local markets are faring. Weaknesses across the currencies, but if you take a look at the JSE All Share, that's certainly in the green, so perhaps the Rand hedge stocks doing a whole lot better. Viv Govender is from Rand Swiss, and he joins us as we unpack the markets a little bit more. Viv, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. As you can take a look, the market's a little bit mixed today, if you want to call it that, but the 0.5 percentage point uptick certainly tells a good story to start off the week.
Yes, most certainly. We are seeing, the resources sector obviously probably being supported by the currency to a certain extent. The currency once more weaker beyond the 1480 level. But strangely enough, the financials are also looking a bit stronger as well. So that might be, something that's irrespective of the currency weakness at the moment.
Yeah, a good set of earnings seems to have come out of Bidvest as well earlier this morning. They seem to be continuing to do so well. Revenue growth also traded higher. Headline earnings per share up around 11% as well. So double-digit growth and upticks on that front. What do you make of the company, though, the fundamentals of that company being based on such a large number of industries as well, going down, however, today around 0.5%, over 200 Rand a share still. What do you make of that company?
Well, I mean, it is a GDP play to a certain extent. So when you have such a huge diversification across different sectors, etc., you hope the economy overall is doing well, and that gives you that boost up that you would need to support them. You can't say there's a specific reason that you'd go for this or that because, like I said, it's difficult to understand the company. It's primarily an economic play and also a execution play as well. The idea that there's some special sauce at your company, in inverted commas, that gives you an advantage in certain industries or across multiple industries, something to do with your management, your style of basically understanding businesses, your style of coordinating, etc. I have found in the past, looking at multiple companies like this here, even though you might have that special, source being there for a while, it's not something that usually stays around forever.
Yeah. Where else then should companies be looking in this time? It's so difficult that markets have generally been performing better outside of South Africa, but it seems that the South African economy is certainly affecting things quite a bit of late. Where do you look for growth? Where exactly should you be going?
Well, I mean, as an investor, I'd probably be looking at probably the US still, and it's for a couple of reasons. The US economy is growing in excess of 4% a year, and Trump may be crazy in a number of factors, but basically what he's doing with the US economy is actually boosting growth, at least in the short term. Cutting regulation, cutting taxes is very positive for economic growth in the short term. And that probably is the area to go for right now. Also, I mean, if you look at the way the world is basically moving at the moment, the way I put it is this, say 100 years ago when they invented cars, Germany made a car, the UK made a car, France made a car, Peugeot, Renault, Italy made a car, the US made a car. So there's different companies making the same technology. But nowadays, when we have things like Google or Facebook or Amazon, there's no American Amazon. There's Amazon. It's the Amazon that's in France, the Amazon that's in the UK, the Amazon that's in Germany. Yeah. The same thing with Facebook. There's one Facebook around the world. There's one Google around the world. And you don't tend to find, the kind of diversification of any technology in different places. You don't find, every country started making their own particular thing, or every continent making its own, thing. You do tend to find that when there is technology, it tends to be in certain specific places. And if you look at what's happening in the S&P 500, for instance, the growth that's happening there, and the amount of that growth that's due to the FANG stocks, these high-tech stocks, you find that much of the outperformance of the US market versus the European market is due to the fact that it has all these high-tech companies, and the European markets don't have any high-tech companies. Virtually, it's like one, SAP, basically this business software. So if you're looking for growth, you're looking for the kind of the jackpots that you've seen in the past. And strangely enough, it's still the US. The one place in the world that you do have alternatives to the US tech companies is in China, and we've benefited from that through Tencent, etc. And that's because they actually have a bit of a barrier around that country that prevents US competition coming in.
Yeah, you speak about China, and that would lead us right through then to some of the Rand hedge stock, including Naspers, which does have a stake in China as well. So looking right behind you, 14 Rand 82. Surely that can't be the mark we all expected a few weeks ago.
Honestly, when I saw the move on the Monday after we had that crisis in Turkey, I honestly expected us to be back below 13 by the end of the week. But look, we've been hit by a couple of things. Firstly, it was Turkey, then it was Argentina thereafter. And in fact, the Argentinian peso has fallen more this year than the Turkish lira. So it's a double whammy for emerging markets. And then look, we were going into this whole cycle or whole bit of trouble quite weak. We had before, just a few weeks before this stuff broke, we had double page articles in the New York Times, which is probably the biggest newspaper in the US. Talking about corruption in South Africa, and the same thing happening in the Wall Street Journal. And of course, there's the Donald Trump tweet with regards to expropriation and compensation. So to a certain extent, we were weaker going into this cycle or this particular series of news events. And then we were hit by, firstly, Turkey. And then just as maybe we thought maybe we would calm down from Turkey, we had Argentina come about as well. So that caused a double bit of weakness, I think. And now we're going across into the whole, increased trade tensions between the US and virtually everyone in the world.
Yeah. Let's finally talk about MTN, just as the last equity play here. Do you still believe the company has some way to perhaps improving in some way? Hopefully, if it sorts out its Nigerian mess again.
Yeah, I think one hope you would have with the MTN is that this election is coming up quite soon in Nigeria, and there's a big chance that we might see a change in government, and that might be a bit more attractive, or not attractive, but a bit easier on the MTN situation in Nigeria. But right now, when your biggest market is basically making these number of cases against you, firstly you had the SIM case, and now we have this repatriation of funds case, and it's been pretty penalizing. It's quite significant amounts of money that's being taken from MTN, and beyond that, quite significant changes in the way they operate in the country has also been put in place. When you have that situation, I think that. If it continues forever, it's a very bad thing for the company. If we do change, the relationship between the company and the government in Nigeria, especially, we might just see a bit of a turn on the company.
Viv Govender, always appreciate chatting to you, man. He's from Rand Swiss. That is an outlook on your markets. Just really taking a look at 0.5% of uptick on the JSE All Share today. More business news coming up right after this. Do stay tuned.